Good evening, my dear friends, and welcome to our live webinar here on Doves for Peace. And for those who may not know who I am, I'm Brother Sean, and I'm a contemplative Franciscan who embraces Celtic, Interfaith, Franciscan spirituality, so our community embraces all faiths. And we welcome them to live the monastic life from their own home. And one of our great patrons is St. Clare of Assisi, who was a childhood friend of Saint Francis of Assisi, the founder of the Franciscan movement back in the 12th century. So this evening I want to dedicate this to St. Clare, Virgin foundress of the Poor Clares, 1193, and she died in 1253. And her feast day was yesterday, the 11th of August. So let's just share with you, if I may, some background to this amazing, incredible spiritual woman. The Lady Clare, shining in name, more shining in life, was born in the town of Assisi about the year 1193. Her mother was to become Blessed Ortolana di Fiumi, and her father is said to have been Favorino Sifi, Count of Sasso Rosso. Though whether he came of that noble branch of the Sifi family is not really certain. But concerning Clare's childhood, we have no reliable information. She was 18 years old when Saint Francis, preaching the Lenten sermons at the Church of St. George in Assisi, influenced her very much to change the whole course of her life. It is likely that a marriage not to her liking had been proposed. At any rate, she went secretly to see Friar Francis, and she asked him to help her to live after the manner of the Holy Gospel. And talking with Francis strengthened her desire to leave all things, all worldly things, behind and live for Christ, her beloved. And on Palm Sunday of that year, in 1212, she came to the Cathedral of Assisi for the blessing of palms. But when the others went up to the altar rails to receive their branch of green, a sudden shyness kept Clare back. The bishop saw it and came down from the altar and gave her a branch. The following evening, she slipped away from her home and hurried through the woods to the chapel of the Portinacula, where Francis was then living with his small community of brothers. Francis and his brethren had been at prayers before the altar and met Clare at the door with lighted tapers in their hands. And before the Blessed Virgin's altar, Clare laid off her fine cloak. She came from a very well-to-do and influential family in Assisi. Francis sheared her hair. She had long trestles of hair, and gave her his own penitential habit, a tunic of coarse cloth tied with a cord, unlike the clothing she was familiar with, which was satin and silk. Then, since as yet he had no nunnery, he took her at once for safety to the Benedictine convent of St. Paul, where she was affectionately welcomed by the sisters. When it was known at home what Clare had done, relatives and friends came to rescue her. They clearly weren't happy. In fact, all their plans for a prearranged marriage had gone by the board, much to the dismay of her mum and dad. And to save face, so as not to incur embarrassment from the intended's family, they sent her brothers to rescue her from the convent. She resisted valiantly, and friends were confused as to what was going on. But when they tried to drag her away, clinging to the convent altar so firmly as to pull the cloths half off, bearing her shorn head, she declared that Christ had called her to his service. She would have no other spouse. And the more they continued their persecutions, guess what? The more steadfast Clare would become. Francis had her removed to the nunnery of Sant Angelo di Panzo, where her sister Agnes, a child of 14, joined her. This meant more difficulty for them both, but Agnes, her constancy too was victorious, and in spite of her youth, Francis gave her the habit as well. Later he placed them in a small and humble house adjacent to his beloved church of San Damiano. The church of Saint Damien on the outskirts of Assisi. And in 1215, when Clare was about 22, he appointed her superior and gave her his rule of life to live by. She was soon joined by her mother and several other women, to the number of 16. They had all felt the strong appeal of poverty and sackcloth. Just think about it. These are women of great substance, women with a lot of influence and used to a very comfortable life, where I guess they had servants who would wait on them hand and foot. And here they are wanting to give their lives to God. And instead of wearing all their refinery and jewels, they chose the simple habit of sackcloth. And without regret, they gave up all their titles and estates to become Christ's humble disciples. Within a few years, similar convents were founded in the Italian cities of Perugia, Padua, Rome, Venice, Mantua, Bologna, Milan, Siena, and Pisa, and also in various parts of France and Germany. Agnes, daughter of the King of Bohemia, established a nunnery of the poor of this order, known as the Poor Ladies, in Prague, and took the habit herself. Just excuse me. That's better. The Poor Clares, as they came to be known, practiced austerities which until then were unusual among women. They went barefoot, they slept on the ground, and observed a perpetual abstinence from meat, and spoke only when obliged to do so by necessity out of charity. Clare herself considered this silence desirable as a means of avoiding the innumerable sins of the tongue, and for keeping the mind steadily fixed on God. Not content with the fasts and other mortifications required by the rule, she wore next to her skin a rough shirt of hair, fasted on vigils and every day in Lent on bread and water, and on some days ate nothing. And I read it somewhere where when they were so short of food, she would go without so that her sisters could eat, and especially sisters who were frail. She would certainly abstain from the bread and ensure that they had her supply. Francis or the Bishop of Assisi sometimes had to command her to lie on a mattress and to take a little nourishment every day. Such was the austerities. But to her it wasn't austere, because her love for Jesus as a bride of Christ was intense. She had an incredible two-way relationship with Christ, and clearly Christ respected Claire for her mortification and her sincerity. And whatever Claire asked of Jesus on behalf of her sisters, it is known that he would grant her requests. Discretion came with years, and much later Claire wrote this sound advice to Agnes of Bohemia. Since our bodies are not of brass and our strength is not the strength of stone, but instead we are weak and subject to corporal infirmities, I implore you vehemently in the Lord to refrain from the exceeding rigor of abstinence which I know you practice, so that living and hoping in the Lord you may offer him a reasonable service and a sacrifice seasoned with the salt of prudence. What wise words, seasoned with the salt of prudence. Francis of Assisi, as we know, had forbidden his order ever to possess revenues or lands or other property. Even when held in common, the brothers were to subsist on daily contributions from the people about them. Claire also followed this way of life. When she left home, she had given what she had to the poor, retaining nothing for her own needs or those of the convent. And Pope Gregory IX proposed to mitigate the requirement of absolute poverty and offered to settle a yearly income on the poor ladies of St. Damien. Claire, eloquent in her determination never to break her vows to Christ and Francis, got permission to continue as they had begun. I need, she said, to be absolved from my sins, but I do not wish to be absolved from my obligation to follow Jesus Christ. And in 1228, therefore 2 years after Francis's death, the Pope granted the Assisi sisterhood a privilegium pauperitatis, big word, or privilege of poverty, that they might not be constrained by anyone to accept possessions. He who feeds the birds of the air and gives raiment and nourishment to the lilies of the field will not leave you in want of clothing or of food until he come himself to minister to you for eternity. The convents in Perugia and Florence asked for and received this privilege. Other convents thought it more prudent to moderate their poverty. Thus began the two observances which have ever since been perpetuated among the Poor Clares, as they later came to be called. The houses of the mitigated rule are called urbanist from the concession granted them in 1263 by Pope Urban IV. But as early as 1247, Pope Innocent IV had published a revised form of the rule, providing for the holding of community property. Claire, the very embodiment of the spirit and tradition of Francis, drew up another rule stating that the sisters should possess no property, whether as individuals or as a community. And 2 days before she died, this was approved by Pope Innocent for the convent of St. Damien. Claire governed the convent continuously from the day when Francis appointed her abbess until her death, a period of nearly 40 years. Yet it was her desire always to be beneath all the rest, serving at table, tending the sick, washing and kissing the feet of the lay sisters when they returned footsore from begging. Her modesty and humility were such that after caring for the sick and praying for them, she often had other sisters give them further care, that their recovery might not be imputed to any prayers or merits of hers. Clare's hands were forever willing excuse me, to do whatever there was of woman's work that could help Francis and his friars. Dispose of me as you please, she would say. I am yours, since I have given my will to God. It is no longer my own. And she would be the first to rise, ring the bell in the choir, and light the candles. She would come away from prayer with a radiant face. The power and the efficacy of her prayers are illustrated by the story told by Thomas of Celano, a contemporary. In 1244, Emperor Frederick II, then at war with the Pope, was ravaging the valley of Spoleto, which was part of the patrimony of the Holy See. He employed many Saracens in his army, and a troop of these infidels came in a body to plunder Assisi. St. Damian's Church, standing outside the city walls, was one of the first objectives. While the marauders were scaling the convent walls, Clare, ill as she was, had herself carried out to the gate, and there the sacrament was set up in sight of the enemy. Prostrating herself before the Blessed Sacrament, she prayed aloud, "Does it please thee, O God, to deliver into the hands of these beasts of the defenseless children whom I have nourished with thy love? I beseech thee, good Lord, protect these whom now I am not able to protect." And whereupon she heard a voice like the voice of a little child saying, "I will have them always in my care." She prayed again for the city, and again the voice came reassuring her. She then turned to the trembling nuns and said, "Have no fear, little daughters. Trust in Jesus." At this, a sudden terror seized their assailants, and they fled in haste. And shortly afterwards, one of Frederick's generals laid siege to Assisi itself for many days. And Clare told her nuns that they who had received their bodily necessities from the city now owed it all the assistance in their power. She bade them cover their heads with ashes and beseech Christ as suppliants for its deliverance. For a whole day and night they prayed with all their might and with many tears, and then God in his mercy so made issue with temptation that the besiegers melted away, and their proud leader with them, for all he had sworn an oath to take the city. Another story, which became very popular in later times, told how Clare and one of her nuns once left their cloister and went down to the Portiuncula to sup with Francis, and how a marvelous light radiated from the room where they sat together. However, no contemporary mentions this story, nor any other writer for at least 150 years, whereas Thomas of Celano says that he had often heard Francis warning his followers to avoid injudicious association with the sisters, and he states flatly that Clare never left the enclosure of St. Damian. During her life and after her death, there were disagreement at intervals between the poor Clares and the Brothers Minor as to their correct relations. The nuns maintained that the friars were under obligation to serve their needs in things both spiritual and temporal. And when in 1230 Pope Gregory IX forbade the friars to visit the convents of the nuns without special license, Clare feared the edict might lead to a complete severing of the ties established by Francis. She thereupon dismissed every man attached to her convent, those who served the material needs as well as those who served them spiritually. If she could not have the one, she would not have the other. The Pope wisely referred the matter to the Minister General of the Brothers Minor to adjust. After long years of sickness borne with sublime patience, Claire's life neared its end in the summer of 1253. Pope Innocent IX came to Assisi to give her absolution, remarking, "Would to God I had so little need of it." To her nuns she said, "Praise the Lord, beloved daughters, for on this most blessed day both Jesus Christ and his vicar have deigned to visit me." Prelates and cardinals gathered round, and many people were convinced that the dying woman was truly a saint. Her sister Agnes was with her, as well as 3 of the early companions of Francis, Leo, Angelo, and Juniper. They read aloud the Passion according to St. John, as they had read it at the deathbed of Francis 27 years before. Someone exhorted Claire to patience, and she replied, "Dear brother, ever since through his servant Francis I have known the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, I have never in my whole life found any pain or sickness that could trouble me." To herself she was heard to say, "Go forth without fear, Christian soul, for you have a good guide for your journey. Go forth without fear, for he that created you has sanctified you, has always protected you and loves you as a mother." Pope Innocent IX and his cardinals assisted at the funeral of the abbess. The Pope would have had her canonized immediately had not the cardinals present advised against it. His successor, Alexander IX, canonized her after 2 years in 1255 at Anagni. Her body, which lay first in the Church of St. George in Assisi, was translated to a stately church built to receive it in 1260. And nearly 600 years later, in 1850, it was discovered embalmed and intact, deep down beneath the high altar, and subsequently removed to a new shrine in the crypt, where lying in a glass case it may still be seen. In 1804, a change was made in the rule of the Poor Clares, originally a contemplative order, permitting these religious to take part in active work. Today there are houses of the order in the North and South of America, Palestine, Ireland, England, as well as on the continent. The emblem of St. Clare, interestingly, is a monstrance, and in art she is frequently represented with the ciborium. St. Clare, Virgin, foundress of the Poor Clares. Celebration of feast day is August the 12th by the pre-1970 liturgical calendar, and August the 11th, the actual date of her death, by the present one. And just to digress, in 2008, April 2008, I was at a wedding in Florence. A family member was getting married. And after the wedding, the following Monday, I got a strong premonition that I had to go to Assisi. So very early in the morning at 7:30, we took the first train from Florence to Assisi. 3.5 hours it took. And then we got a taxi up to the Basilica. And by that time, it was late morning. There were coaches arriving from all over Italy. There were thousands of pilgrims all over the place, and I could feel myself getting claustrophobic. I had one desire, and that was to see St. Francis' body. or tomb. And finally I found the staircase leading down into the bowels of the basilica, and there was a door, and curiosity got the better of me. I opened it, and there was Saint Francis in this beautiful sarcophagus, and all I remember was kneeling and crying. I must have wept for a long time, and it was then I sensed in my heart that I had to take a different journey, and that was to leave my comfort zone as a Catholic Christian and embrace all faiths, but not just embrace all faiths, which I've always done, but was to set up a community, the Interfaith Franciscans, welcoming men and women of different faiths to come and share their life when the vision would be manifested, where a group of men and women would live the monastic life in an eco-sustainable community, known as the Frank Clara Abbey of Peace. But until then, our lay monastics would live the monastic life from their own home, either as married or single men or women, or they could be employed, hold down a job, be self-employed. Some are nurses, work for the health authority. Others are retired, like myself. Some have chosen to remain celibate. Some have chosen to live the contemplative life, and others a more active life. But in Assisi, I was guided to go to St. Clare's Basilica. And there was a sign, Tomb of St. Clare. And it was a Poor Clare monastery. And I remember going down these long stairs and going right under the basilica in a single file. And you came to this grille, and there in the glass coffin was St. Clare herself, embalmed. And I was speechless. It was the most beautiful experience. Her gentleness, you could see her hands, and she was in the full habit of what it was in those days, and you thought, my word, you gave your life to God. You renounced everything, titles, wealth, success, prestige, to wear a hair shirt and a sackcloth habit, and to give your life to Christ. And when I look at some religious today who don't wear the habit, I think, what a shame, because they've abandoned their uniform of witness. And some are dressed like ordinary people, and they all think it's great. I don't think it's great. I think it's important to wear a uniform, to be identified. I know when I have to go out to the shops, people come up, some people give you strange looks and think, oh my God, who's that? But you know, some people come up to you and they say, are you a monk? And I said, yes. Will you pray for me? And then when they tell you the story, I just put my arms around them and hugged them. But they say, I'm not a Christian. I said, that doesn't matter. I believe in something, but I'm not sure what it is. I said, it doesn't matter. What matters is that you are important. And to me, you carry the essence of the divine in your heart. It doesn't matter whether you're a prostitute, a sex worker, an alcoholic, a drug addict, a lesbian. It doesn't matter. What matters is that you are able to share and tell your story, and there will be no condemnation from me. I'm not here to judge. I've done it in the past as a Catholic nursing monk. My God, did I judge? Such a hypocrite was I. Oh, but now I'm free of all that nonsense, all that dogma, the rules and regulations. So much of it was false. And most of my brother monks were miserable. Very few were like Clare of Assisi or Francis. But today, the simple rule that we live by is give and take. And that we're invited to take vows, and we're invited to word them accordingly. Some choose to take celibacy, it's not enforced. I've chosen it, but I've also chosen the vow of providence, which I feel is the greatest of all the vows. And providence means for me that you put your whole trust in God for your daily needs, not your wants. God doesn't do want, he does needs. So we trust in God for our needs, and our needs are met, trust me. The moment you surrender your heart to God, like Clare, Francis, something happens. The divine comes into you and reawakens you to prioritize and live a simpler life. But when I looked at Clare there in her glass coffin, that did have a profound impact on me. And I'm thankful for the privilege that I had of going to Assisi. I didn't want to go. And I guess going to the wedding was the pretext, because all along God had a plan. And thankfully I went, and I was told in my heart to set up the Teo community of Interfaith Franciscans. And I panicked because I thought I'll be rejected for this. And true enough, I have been rejected by my own church. And many Christian pastors have an issue because we embrace all faiths. I am a Catholic Christian. I believe in Jesus Christ. He's my Lord and Savior. I'm married to him. I have vowed my life to him for peace and unity in the world. But a lot of our members are not like me. They're not Christian. But I respect them and I love them, and I'm not here to convert them. As Pope Francis says when he was approached by an evangelical Christian, but what about homosexuality? He said, well, what about it? He said, the church, he said, no, we're not here to condemn or judge. We're here to give compassion. If someone is happy in their own mind and in their own conscience and it's clear, then who are we to judge? And that's where we've all gone wrong. And that's why so many people are wary of religion, because it controls and leaves one feeling guilty and screwed up. But for me, Clare and Francis epitomize the simple life. Travel light. Travel light. And be still. And if you wish to want to know more about our community, at the moment an online community, where we meet for prayer morning and evening, and evenings at 8 o'clock for a live webinar, you can go just Google Teo, T-A-U, community.com. Let's be still now. Take a deep breath. And just feel the earth under your feet. There's so much to be said for being barefoot, because you feel the earth pulsate. You feel her energy, the energies from Mother Earth. We are in the Cathedral of God, the landscape, and we are surrounded by all of God's creatures, God's beautiful animals, the birds that sing to us. They are the choristers of God. And you are in this beautiful garden. It may be where you live, but where you are, you sense the peace of God. It may be the peace of the Lord Buddha, Vishnu, Ganesh, Krishna, but you feel the presence of something powerful and beautiful and divine. And with each in-breath that you breathe in that love. And that love reawakens your heart to surrender to love. Be still now. And just visualize Francis and Claire of Assisi, a young man and a young woman who were the best of friends and who renounced everything for the light. In the eyes of the world, they'd nothing, but in the eyes of the Supreme God, they were millionaires because they had everything they needed and everything was provided for. And as you sit here, you can call on them and you can ask them to speak to your heart. If you're at a crossroads, maybe you would like to do something similar and give your life to God for unity and peace. Maybe you would like to live in the world but not be of it and live as a lay monastic, but be fun and joy-filled and happy, rather than do what I had to do, and that was renounce everything, to go away and live the cloistered life for 3 years as I trained to become a nursing monk, where you didn't see your family and you had no contact except by letter once a month. That is not the way of the Teo community. But allow God touch your heart now. Allow the spirit of peace come upon you and bless you. And I would like to conclude with the lovely prayer of Francis of Assisi. And I would like you to share it with me. Lord, make me a channel of your peace, that where there is hatred, I may bring love, that where there is wrong, I may bring your spirit of forgiveness and love, that where there is discord, that I may bring harmony, that where there is error, I may bring truth, that where there is doubt, I may bring faith, that where there are shadows, I may bring in thy light, that where there is sadness, I may bring joy. Lord, grant that I may seek rather to comfort than be comforted, to understand than to be understood, to love than to be loved. For it is in giving that one receives. It is by self-forgetting that one finds. It is by forgiving that one is forgiven. It is by dying that one awakens to eternal life. The animals of the earth are among God's very special creatures. They help us work, they carry us, they guard our homes at night, and best of all, they bring us joy and laughter. Saint Francis of Assisi. Thank you for staying with me. I hope I haven't bored you, but I hope I've raised some awareness about this incredible young woman who did some amazing things in the 12th century, and her vision lives on right to this very day. That says something about her charisma. But she found the pearl of great price the moment she renounced her ego and her desire for selfishness. The moment she surrendered her heart to God was the moment something pretty amazing happened. The seed was planted, and those who followed her vision down through the centuries have watered that seed with their love. And today, her vision is all around us. Her love is here. And I ask St. Clare to bless you with St. Francis of Assisi and all the many men and women who've since followed them and who are in glory, to watch over you. Good night and God bless you. Namaste, Shalom. Inshallah, pax et bonum OmShanti. Solo di caritas. Salam alaikum. Peace.